When I first learned that my ex-husband had cheated on me, I had the following self-preserving thoughts. But I was a supportive wife. We never fought. We had a great sex life. We were each other's best friends. You see, up until that point, I always thought that affairs happened in marriages that were devoid of love, of intimacy, of connection. And after that, I learned otherwise. Affairs can happen for so many reasons. Now, before I get into those reasons, I want to make it clear, by no means am I excusing their decision to cheat. That is never, ever, ever an okay decision to make. In every single one of these situations, the right choice, the healthy choice, the mature choice would not have been to cheat. It would have been to initiate a conversation. Maybe a difficult one, yes, but a conversation nonetheless. Because no matter what the underlying reasons are, cheating is always a selfish act. It is always cruel. It is always cowardly. And it is never the right choice. Sometimes people cheat because of ultimately a bad decision. And I hate the way that sounds. In fact, it makes my skin crawl and my stomach turn. But here's the truth of it. You know, at various points, we are all going to be attracted to other people, regardless of our marital status. It's natural. It happens. Now, for those of us that have integrity and maturity, well, we handle that by not putting ourselves in a bad situation. We make sure that we're not alone with that person. We limit contact. We don't nurture those feelings. We don't let them grow. But others, well, they're not so wise about it. And instead, they allow themselves to get closer. And so ultimately, they may find themselves in a situation where, because they didn't say no at so many other junctures, they're at a point where it feels impossible to say no now. Sometimes people cheat because they're in need of a physical connection. Now, yes, sometimes the marriage is devoid of affection or lacking in sexual attention. But sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes the cheater uses that as an excuse. Because let's face it, unless you have a tendency to live with your blinds open and your lights on, how can you ever prove them wrong? And then there's this, the lack of a physical connection can be complicated and nuanced. After all, it's hard for you to feel affectionate when all of their energy is directed elsewhere. Some people cheat because they're looking for an emotional connection. And there's a lot of commonalities here with the physical one. In many of these situations that I've encountered, the person that cheated, bemoans the lack of emotional intimacy at home. Yet at the same time, they don't reveal themselves to their partners. So how in the world can they expect to feel seen and appreciated by their spouse when all they're doing is closing themselves off? In both of those cases, a healthy relationship requires that a person is vulnerable with their partner. And some people struggle with that vulnerability. And strangely enough, sometimes they're more able to be open with a stranger, with somebody that doesn't know them as well, when the stakes don't feel as high. And so they cheat on us, not because there's anything wrong with us, but because they're afraid. They're afraid of being seen. Others are driven by a need for approval. Perhaps they suffer from low self-esteem or are driven by a narcissistic need for attention. But they always need, their fan club. And a fan club of one simply isn't enough for them. These are often your serial adulterers because even one affair partner isn't enough. They want to be adored by many. You have others that have a high need for stimulation. They get bored or restless easily and are constantly moving from one thing to another. And what's so sad with these is marriage probably was not the right choice for them in the beginning. But instead of coming to you and having that conversation, perhaps even before the wedding, they instead choose to deceive and pretend to live one life while secretly living another. Others are driven by a need to escape. Not escape the marriage per se, but often escape themselves. They're not happy. They're dealing with a lot of shame. And again, that lack of courage, instead of facing it, instead of looking inward, instead of having those hard conversations, instead of going to couples counseling or individual counseling, instead, they run away. They use the affair as a way to hide themselves and to hide from themselves. In a similar vein, others are on what I call a snipe hunt for happiness. They know that they're not content with something in their life. They may not even be able to pinpoint what it is. In fact, these types rarely have much self-awareness, much less maturity. And so they're looking for something that makes them feel good. And so they end up in someone else's bed. And they may feel good in that moment, but it doesn't last. Sometimes people cheat because they're feeling ambivalent about the relationship or about the particular stage that it's in. These are the ones that cheat in the weeks and months leading up to the wedding, or cheat on their pregnant spouse, or have an affair right before a cross-country move or the purchase of the dream home. You see, they're afraid of that increasing level of commitment. And instead of talking about that fear in a healthy way, they hide from it by cheating. And then finally, you have those that use cheating as a way to force the end of a relationship. They want out. They're not happy. They don't believe that the relationship is working. But again, instead of having the courage to have that conversation to say, I need to leave, they do something to force your hand. They have an affair with the hope that you'll discover it and that you will be the one to make that decision to end it. And none of these reasons for cheating are valid in the sense that it excuses the behavior. None of them give somebody the right to lie to you, to betray you. That decision is never okay. But I hope that for you, that by understanding some of these reasons, it helps you find just a little bit of distance, take it just a little bit less personally. Because the sad truth is, affairs can happen in any relationship, regardless of how good of a partner you are, regardless of how good your marriage was. This was a selfish and cruel choice that they made. And there's never a good enough reason for that.